Welcome back to Telltale Poetry Submission Interview Series. I'm so pleased to be interviewing Allison Joseph, incredible professor, poet, and curator of creative writing opportunities. Allison is author of several poetry books and chapbooks. She directs the MFA program in creative writing at Southern Illinois University. Her latest full-length book of poetry, Confessions of a Barefaced Woman, was published by Redham Press in 2018. It was chosen as the gold first place winner in the poetry category of the 2019 Feathered Quilt Book Awards. Confessions of a Barefaced Woman is also a 2019 nominee in the poetry category of the NAACP Image Awards. It's also a 2019 finalist for both the Montaigne Medal, did I say that right? And the Da Vinci Eye Book Award, sponsored by the Eric Hoffer Book Awards. So welcome to Allison. Thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me for the Telltale Poetry Submission Interview Series. We're fortunate enough to get to actually meet briefly in person at AWP, and that was just awesome. It was so great to see you there with that. That reading was just beautiful. It was really, really lovely. I wanted to ask you a little bit about creative writing ops, and it's definitely been so helpful for me over the years. When I first started getting into trying to publish poetry, it was one of the first places that I found that really posted submission calls. Can you tell me a little bit about the original inspiration for it?
First of all, thank you for having me. We've been
Of course.
planning this for a while, so it's good to have it come to fruition.
Yes.
And in terms of the Creative Writers Listserv, there were kind of two origin stories.
Okay.
Because as writers, we can't have just a simple way of something coming into being, can we? We have to have several stories. One was I had a habit of duplicating submission opportunities for the students in my MFA program. And also, I was on a group listserv, the equivalent of today's chat, called WAMPO, which exists now, I believe, as mainly as a Facebook group. But in those, early to middle internet days, everyone was on Yahoo groups. So instead of posting things and duplicating things, I started a Yahoo group listserv for anyone, not charging anybody. But whenever I would find something that I thought was useful to poets, fiction writers, and nonfiction writers, I would send it out. And God knows how many people were on that listserv. And it came to an end. I'm anticipating your next question, like why did the listserv come to an end?
Sure.
Because Yahoo groups decided to stop doing it, and that was around the time I lost John. So it seemed a good time to move on from what in some ways was problematic anyway,
Sure.
and give my heart a break, because, well, basically my heart was broken and remains so. But that's the interesting things, that writers always find a way to connect and share what they need to share. So now I do a blog for Crops, which is sort of a legacy blog, but also on Facebook I have a couple of groups that are intended to serve writers as well.
Oh, okay, great. So what are those Facebook groups, if you don't mind sharing them?
Okay, there are three.
All right.
One is called Illinois Poets and Writers. Since I live in Illinois, I wanted to have a space where writers who are connected. It's a big state. It's urban, it's rural, it's suburban, and there is no statewide organization. Some states have like a statewide writing organization, and there used to be one in Illinois, but there isn't. And I don't have time to run one, but I'm like, hey, I can at least do a Facebook group and get people who live in Chicago aware of what's happening in the Metro East, or the people who live in Springfield, what's going on in Champaign. Just it's a state with a real rich literary history, but so people tend to take it for granted. Um, that's one. Another is I had started several years ago a group called Heartland uh, Literary Events and Readings. So people could post a notices of literary events that were going on in the Midwest. That was originally a Midwest group. And when the pandemic happened and everybody moved on to Zoom, I said, just post wherever you're hoping to have an event. And now it's Heartland. It's for anyone who is hosting either a Zoom event, virtual event, or a real life event. So it's a literary events calendar for readings and other writerly events like workshops and things like that. Because and on crops, I was always getting stuff from people who wanted to promote their workshops. And there are so many workshops and writer events, and this is a good thing, I think, that uh, there are a lot of them, but they were starting to crowd out everything else.
Right.
So that's basically an events calendar for readings and other like festivals and things like that. The other one is called Rex in Effect. And it's Rex in Effect, writers helping writers, and it's a group. I was thinking about how difficult, if particularly if you're like you're publishing your first book or your first chapbook and you don't know anybody. uh, Perhaps you might be able to tap your teachers for a blurb, or there's just so much gatekeeping in the literary arts. You know, if you want to go to a writer's colony, you have to get recommendations. You know, you're going to publish this book, you have to have blurbs. And I'm like, maybe if I get people talking about what they need to one another, it's so agonizing sometimes when you have to ask somebody for something. And I know there are sometimes opportunities I see that I kind of let slide by because yet again asking for another recommendation or asking for something else, it gets old. But I
It does.
thought,
It's hard.
yeah, originally it was called Blurbs and Recs. Blurbs and Rec, like Parks and Rec, one of my favorite shows. But I took blurbs out because even the word blurb is controversial for writers, because I meant it to mean, say you're going to have a book coming out and you have to approach people to write a blurb for the back.
Right.
You know, the back cover recommendation. So many writers, particularly writers who are working in self-publishing writers, think believe blurb means the synopsis on the back of the book. And people started fighting about that. So I'm like, I'm going to get the word blurb out of the title. Um, so now it's Rex in Effect, but the objective is the same, that writers often have information that they can help other writers, or like if someone says, hey, I'm putting together a fellowship application for blank, has anyone else done this? So this is, and I try to keep the conversation civil, which is not necessarily always easy.
Right.
So those are the three, in addition to crops, those are the three things through Facebook that I've managed to do. And I hope they're useful to people.
Yeah, no, they sound fantastic. And I'm definitely going to go check them out. I wasn't aware that you were up to all of that. And it sounds like quite a bit. I mean, it can be challenging to run a Facebook group, especially something where, it's just all these people that you don't even know, and
Right.
conversations perk
Yeah.
up, and sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not. So,
Yeah, I think Rex in Effect has about 950 people in it now, and they're not
yeah,
all from the United States, they're from around the world. It's
sure.
it's a group. I can't remember the settings on it, private or public. I forget. But I do try to do a little bit of screening, and if I see somebody is just try out to sell people something or con people, if I get, you get that itchy feeling like, I don't know if this is on the up and up. But most people in the group, depending on, you know, what their own background is, uh, it, we tend to hoard resources, and uh, I'm all for like sharing the wealth and getting the information out there to people who might not have even known that writers colonies exist. I can't tell you how many times I've run into people who um, are writers. And I'm like, oh, there's all this stuff out there. They're like, there are writers colonies. It's like, yeah, you can actually get somebody to give you money to go to wherever it is and sit and contemplate your work.
Yeah, no, it is interesting how some people have sort of stay isolated as a writer, right? Where, so many others really look to build that community. And I think there are plenty who don't even recognize those communities exist. So those groups all sound really amazing. And I love how they focus on like different aspects of writing and the writing biz, if you want to call it that. So
Yeah, the events group sort of runs itself by now because people
sure.
have gotten very used to doing Zoom and virtual events and publicizing them via Facebook and other social media. So that just nothing ever bad happens because people are just posting, okay, and these three people are giving a reading in Madison, and here's the Zoom link. And that's because of the pandemic. That's the interesting thing, that a lot of events are now sort of hybrid, that you can access. They're moving back to being face-to-face events, but you can access them if the organizers have a way of doing it through Zoom or through Facebook events or however they're doing it. So I think that might be one of the possible few positive legacies of this whole era we're living in.
I agree. I agree. I think it's so great to see. Well, it's hard to let go of, right? Once you start getting that more national or even international visibility, you recognize there's so much more opportunity there and how many more people can actually benefit from the different events and participate. And I mean, hybrid just makes sense. And I think it's really opened up a whole world for so many people that, didn't have access. So yeah, I hope that that continues. I am looking forward to doing some stuff in person though.
Yeah. I haven't done personally a face-to-face reading since the March 2020 AWP in San Antonio. I've
Right.
done scads of both teaching for various entities and readings. This month already, I've done readings for Georgia College in Milledgeville, Georgia, and the Downtown Writers Center in Syracuse. And I didn't have to go to Georgia or to New York. I was right here in this, and that is a good thing, I think.
Yes, agreed. Agreed. So, I mean, you talked about your Facebook groups and how well they run for the most part. Crops also seems to run just like a well-oiled machine.
Right.
So, oh,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what advice do you have to other writers who actually want to start their own way of giving back to the literary community or a resource?
Right. You got to figure out what your own strengths are and
Mm,
then capitalize on them. And since I've been involved with event planning, oh, there's a fourth group. I forgot about this. There's another group it's been less active because of the pandemic, but I had started a group for people who plan literary events and conferences, so we could ask boring questions like, um, how much for a room rental for a weekend, and that kind of thing. Because if you do or have planned such events, you know that there are so many different moving pieces. If you're planning just if you're planning just a face-to-face reading, or nowadays if you're planning a virtual reading, there's a lot to keep in mind. So that group has been less active. I think it's called Literary Planners Advocacy Group or something like that. Um, Part of the fun is making up names for things.
Yeah, no, I really, I appreciate all the different insight you're giving us on some of those Facebook group names. And so what would you like to see more of in the literary community? What do you think we're still kind of lacking?
That's interesting. Um, and I had to think about this fairly recently because I had applied to be poet laureate of the state of Illinois, which I was top three. I was not eventually chosen, but I had to start thinking about, like, if I were poet laureate, what sort of projects. And I'm happy to say that the selection of Angela Jackson as Illinois Poet Laureate, she's doing many of the things I would have done anyway. She's working with youth, which I think is always important. And underdone, as many programs as you see out there that target youth with the literary arts, there's always more of a need. You can always reach more students at different levels. Um, Also, I'm interested in integrating poetry with other arts, whether it's poetry and music, poetry and visual arts, poetry and stand up comedy, whatever it is. Just having bringing an audience to poetry that may not think they even like poetry.
Right. I love that. I love that. I think that is, I mean, we've seen a lot more since the pandemic of film with
Hmm.
poetry, which I've really loved seeing, like some of these short films that have been put
Based on poetry, yeah.
with the poem. Yeah, yeah, really great stuff. That's, I wish I knew a little bit more about about filmmaking, because I think that would be a really fascinating thing to dig into. But as you mentioned, focusing on your strengths, I'm not going to become a filmographer any day soon. so so that's not one I probably will explore, but I would love to partner with someone, on something like that in the future. What has really helped you the most as a writer?
What has helped me the most? Well, being married for 27 years, partnered with 31 years to another writer, and I think
Mm,
that's for me. That's why the last couple of years have been difficult. Losing John Tribble, my husband, in 2019, before all this stuff started. um, I realized how if there are so many popular culture tropes about if artists or writers get married to one another, it's going to be, you know, smash bottles and dash dreams. But we were really a team, and I miss having someone who shares my history as a writer and could push me, and I push him. So I think, you know, having someone doesn't necessarily have to be your spouse. It was in my case, but having someone who understands that you're going to be a little janky sometimes because you've got something going on up here. You're going to be a little strange, or you're going to just, you know, disappear for a couple days because you're working on something. And someone who is willing to, and this does not necessarily have to be another writer, but if you have a really good first reader, someone who can read your early manuscripts, it can be a fellow writer, but also there are really wonderful people who are pleasure readers, um, and they can read your work as well as any agent or editor or publishing professional. Um, so some people luck into that, having a friend or someone they went to graduate school with, who continues to be first reader for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a lot of success in that, just swapping manuscripts with other
Mhm.
poets and writers. It's really great when you can sort of, exchange uh, that extra work. It's nice to share and get someone to support you. I've done that with book reviews too, which was super fun, where we, reviewed each other's books, and then when the magazine published it, they specifically talked about how we had done that. So it was really great because it was very transparent, that we were helping each other out, and it was really a great project. So how can viewers sign up for Crops? We talked about your Facebook pages, but
Well, that's the great thing. Since it's now a blog rather than a listserv, people just go to the listserv and check it out. Go to the blog and check it out. Um, uh, so there's no signing up, which was a big relief for me. When I did it as a listserv, there were always problems with people not getting the postings, or the postings going into someone's junk mail, or someone signing up for it and then not remembering they signed up for it and getting mad that they were getting all these postings. I'm like, you signed up for this. I never signed anybody up for it. But writers are also forgetful. But just to it's creativewritersops.blogspot.com.
perfect. Excellent.
That's all anyone needs to know. And there's a service called Blog Trotter. Some people were like, but I need them as emails. I'm like, just sign up for Blog Trotter, and Blog Trotter will send the post to you as emails. And that's what I do.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip, because you can actually use that for any blog that you're following,
Yep.
right? It'll
Any
track
blog,
it for you.
Blog Trotter. There's no E in it.
Oh, okay, very good. Excellent. Do you have any other advice for Telltale listeners?
Um, Advice. I have been during the pandemic doing so much writing. Between the pandemic and doing uh, elegiac grief writing of my own. So as things hopefully move back to a more normal world, maybe a world where COVID is not pandemic but endemic, finding and this is a task I assign for myself, finding the strength to turn that pandemic writing into what will constitute literature, to move our writing back to the forefront, because it's really hard right now for me to feel, oh God, writing literary magazines, contests, workshops, conferences. It's still so hard to conceive of them mattering. So getting back the spirit that, yes, these things do matter, and our literary expression, our literary lives do matter. Um, but we've been living basically under emergency orders for 3 years now. So it's going to take some time to, and I'm hoping there are no more variants lurking for us.
Right.
uh,
Right.
that we can get back to receptions with punch and cookies, and
Mhm.
particularly for, I think it will be storytelling, poetry, stand up, create any kind of creative expressions will be really important to the rehabilitation of children and teens. I mean, there's a reason why TikTok blew up big, because people needed an outlet. What scares me about TikTok is mouthing someone's words isn't enough. You have to find your own words.
I love that. And the kids and the teens have really had the roughest time during the pandemic, and it feels like it's going to take some momentum, to bring them back, get them caught up, So I think that's all really important to mention. I know a lot of us did do a lot of writing over the pandemic, but then, you know, thinking of it as getting back to it as this is an art and it's important and it needs to be out there. I think that is, going to be the next step. And it's going to be a little bit hard.
Yeah, it's going to be hard because you can get stuck in these pandemic patterns of basically pulling the blankets over your head and going back to bed.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hopefully we will get to see each other again in person sometime in the future, maybe the next AWP or some other event. I have been known to need to go to Illinois for work, so maybe
Right.
at some point we can connect. That would be fantastic.
Just let
Thank-
me know.
I will, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today. This was awesome. And give us the Crops website one more time, the blog.
creativewritersops.blogspot.com.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we will talk again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.